Want to introduce the next speaker, Joe with Precision Optics Corporation.
Thank you. Do you want one? Yeah, in case you will stop. Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for staying late. I know it's getting late in the day, especially for those of us from the East Coast. So I appreciate you staying late. I'm here with Wayne Cole, our CFO. I've been with the company about 20 years. I've been CEO for a little over 10 years. Wayne's been with the company almost a year. So you got the newest member and the oldest member of the executive team here today. So I'm really excited to talk to you about Precision Optics Corporation. We are POCI on the Nasdaq. We've been on Nasdaq for about a year and a half now. We uplisted from OTCQB, and we're pretty excited about how things are going. So Precision Optics Corporation, as the name implies, is an optics company. Everything we do has something to do with optics. We make imaging systems, illumination systems, communication systems. We are at our core a technology company. And so we made a decision a couple of years after I started as CEO to start with a sort of updated business plan. And there are a couple of critical aspects to that business plan. The first of which is that as an optics company, we decided that we were not going to do all optics for all customers. Optics today is a very broad field. Optics and photonics are all around us. They're everywhere. But we made a decision to focus on some very specific core technologies within the broad area of optics. And I'll tell you about those specific areas that we focused on. They have to do, generally speaking, with very small optics, micro optics, and imaging technologies that can be used in a number of different applications, but predominantly in the areas of healthcare, specifically medical devices, and also in the defense aerospace marketplace. The business model is one where we took some time and we developed these core technologies to a point where we had them well protected and well developed. And then we went out and we talked to the customer community, predominantly in the medical device space, and we showed them the technologies we had and the kinds of products that we could build using these technologies. And when we talk to a customer and we find they agree and we agree that our technology is likely to enable their next generation product, then we engage with them initially on a design process where we take our technology and, as I like to say, turn it into the size, shape, and color of the product that they need. But underlying all of this is our IP. We ask that our customer pay us for that development process, so we get paid on a time and materials basis with a nice profit. But we insist that we maintain ownership of all of the IP that we came with and that comes out of that development process. Okay, so we maintain control and ownership of the IP, which is critical for a technology company because ultimately that's what we're selling. We're selling access to our technology. After we finish the design phase of the projects that we're working on and we turn our technology into the product that our customer needs, we're the ideal candidate then to continue manufacturing that product after it goes into production. And the reason for that is we've designed our own technology into the product. We've also designed, as part of our technology, the processes and the tools and fixtures that are required to build these products that are based on our proprietary technology. So the business model here is that we have an engineering pipeline. We have a design team that takes new project ideas from our customers. They get paid on a time and materials basis for the work that they're doing. And they work on a project, they get it through the design phase, and when it goes into production, they throw it over to our production team, and our production team then will be manufacturing this product with a nice margin for many years to come. In the medical device field in particular, once a product gets into production, it tends to stay there for a long, long time. We have some products that have been going for 25 years with very well-known medical device companies that we just make day in and day out. So the idea is we have the engineering team that develops the new products. We throw it over into the manufacturing team. Manufacturing continues to grow over time, and that allows us to grow the business and to increase profits, which we then use a portion of to come back and continue to invest in the technology development through our internal R&D. We've been working on this business plan, this business model for a number of years now, 7, 8 years. When we first started, we had to get our technology up to snuff. We had to get it, to where it was ready to go out for prime time. And then we had to go and find our first couple of customers. And then we had to run those first couple of customers through the engineering pipeline in order to get to a product. And we've done that over the last 6 or 7 years. And you can see from this chart that now we're starting to the business model is starting to take hold. And we've had some nice revenue growth over the last 6 or 7 years on a continuous basis. You can see a couple of things here in particular. The gray revenue here is our engineering team. So this is revenue from the design phase of the work that we're doing. And you can see that it's growing pretty nicely. There's really 2 reasons for that. The first one is that we're bringing more customers into the engineering pipeline, which is critical to continue the growth of the production in the future. And secondly, we've invested pretty heavily in growing that engineering team in order to be able to satisfy the increase in customer demand that we've seen. You can also see that the blue part of the revenue curve here has also increased pretty consistently. One year it didn't increase. This was COVID, where some of the production dropped a little bit, but the engineering continued on faster than it was going before. And so the increase in the production revenue is indicating these new products that are coming out of the design phase and going into production as we anticipated and as we intend for that to continue happening. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the technology. So I told you we decided we were not going to do everything for every customer in optics. We selected some very specific areas where we have a lot of experience, and these are the 3 areas. So the first one is micro-optics. We make some of the smallest optics in the world. We make one optic, which is a right-angle prism, which is used to redirect light and to take the light and turn it 90 degrees. This right-angle prism is 50 microns, 50 microns, which is about the width of a human hair. So it's very hard to see. You have to look at it under a microscope. But I like to point out that the reason that optics that we're making are considered micro-optics are not because they have anything to do with the light. The light doesn't think of them as micro. The molecules of glass that are in the optic don't think that they're small, right? There are lots and lots of molecules. The reason that they're micro is because of the limitations of the resolution of our eyes and the limitations of the dexterity of our hands, right? So a lot of the technology that we have developed has to do with overcoming those kinds of limitations with tooling and fixture and processes that we can use to make these very, very small optics. In addition to making the very small optics, we have a design team that knows how to design a system that can be put together with multiple of these optics so that you can build an entire imaging system or illumination system. It's very easy for an optical engineer who's had reasonable amount of training to sit at a computer and design an optical system that looks like it'll work at whatever size you want. But in order to be able to make a system that you can actually put together, that you can actually align and get good resolution and good imaging out of, you have to have a lot of experience working with very small optics because the rules of how you're going to put them together and how you're going to configure them are very different than they are for regular sized optics. So the micro-optics capability extends from the ability to fabricate the individual components to the ability to design an entire system to the ability to manufacture the entire system and put the whole thing together. So that's the first area that we work on. The picture here is a picture of an entire camera that's about 1 millimeter in size. That's this picture here. The second area of our that we focus on from a technology standpoint is in the area of 3D imaging. And basically speaking, this is exactly the same as the technical way that you can see 3D when you're looking at a 3D movie. Okay, but we've been able to take this 3D technology and shrink it down to a size where you can use it for minimally invasive surgery or for endoscopes. And so there are many, many companies today that can make a regular traditional 2D rigid endoscope. That's a fairly standard kind of product. The technology, the specifications that are required for a 3D endoscope are orders of magnitude tighter than the specifications that you need for a traditional standard 2D rigid endoscope. And I'm happy to explain to people why that is, but the bottom line is it's much, much more difficult to make a 3D endoscope. And we've been working on 3D endoscopes now for many years. We did the very first 3D endoscope for Intuitive Surgical in the late 1990s. And so we have a unique capability here that only a handful of companies in the world can really do. The third area is a little bit broader. It's digital imaging. And so this is the idea that we can take an imaging system and design and manufacture not only the part of the imaging system that relies on light, but also the part that relies on electronics. And the interface between those, of course, are imaging sensors, the sensors that were made for computer cameras and cell phone cameras and such. Many of the so-called CMOS manufacturers that are making these sensors are now looking for ways to get into the medical device space or further into defense aerospace. And so we can combine the capabilities that we have with the CMOS sensors that we can source from them when we partner with them, and we can build entire systems around the CMOS sensor. We now have the capability to be able to design the entire system, including the light portion of the system and the electronic portion of the system. Okay, so what are the markets that we work in? When we started down this road with this updated business plan, we looked around and we, not surprisingly, identified medical devices as one of the places where our technologies would have the greatest value. Again, as a small company, we were very disciplined, and we marketed exclusively to this one marketplace. Okay, so we were working specifically in medical devices. The technologies that we work with have specific applications in these areas. So the micro-precision optics are used to make very, very small endoscopes. And the example that I really like to use, and those of you who have heard me talk before, who have talked with me before, this will be familiar, but there are other examples as well. This is just the easiest to understand. We make an endoscope that's 350 microns in diameter. And this is an endoscope that's used for a cardiac application. It's small enough that the cardiac surgeon can snake this endoscope through a blood vessel and through the valves in the heart and can go up and look at the inside wall of the beating heart while they're doing cardiac ablation to cure atrial fibrillation. And I like this as an example because it's a great example of where our technology isn't just a nice to have. It's not just a little bit better to have the endoscope a little bit smaller here. It really is enabling, because if the endoscope in this case isn't small enough to get through the blood vessel, you just can't do the procedure, right? So the micro precision work that we do for medical devices has great applications in a number of the places where there's big expansion in minimally invasive surgery that's happening because of innovations in the field, and our technology is part of the innovation that makes this all possible. So you can think of places in the body where access to the places you want to get to, or where the incision size is really, really critical. Those are the places where our micro-optics are really well suited. So you can think of things, we do a lot with ear, nose, and throat. Ophthalmology for eyeballs, we make an endoscope that can actually go into the side of the eyeball. That's only about 1 millimeter in size. We do some brain things. We do some things in spine. We do a lot of things with urology and cystoscopy, those kinds of things. Again, places in the body where you can think of that you have to be really small. On the 3D imaging side, 3D endoscopes, I told you that we started this technology back in 1990s when we built the first 3D endoscope for Intuitive Surgical, which is the market leader for robotic surgery. As robotic surgery has grown as a market and as an application, there are more and more systems that require 3D endoscopes. So not all robotic surgery requires 3D endoscopes, but in many cases, because you're moving the surgeon away from the bedside of the patient and you're putting them remote, having the extra information that they can get by having depth perception when they're looking through the endoscope inside the body can be very helpful. So this is really the place where the 3D endoscopy can be very useful. The third area in minimally invasive surgery that is useful, that finds use for our digital imaging technology is wherever we want to be able to build a full medical system. So wherever our customer is interested in having us design a system that will allow them to put the whole system in place as one whole unit, as opposed to an endoscope that goes to a rack tower with lots of other pieces that are in it. One of the places that this has really had a huge impact and that is really growing the market very substantially is in the area of single-use endoscopes. So the basic idea here is that a traditional endoscope had many optical elements that had to be incorporated into the endoscope to take the image as light outside of the body before you could put it on a big camera that was sitting outside the body. With some of the work that we and our partners have done to make CMOS sensors smaller and smaller and smaller, and the optics that go with it smaller and smaller and smaller, we can now get to a point where we can put the CMOS sensor on the distal end of the endoscope, and so the cost of the optical components gets much, much lower because you're not carrying the image all the way outside the body with a whole bunch of expensive optical components. So what that means is that we can get to a price point where we can make endoscopes that can be used once and then discarded. And this has a huge benefit because there's always a problem, not always, but there is an issue in the medical device arena where reusable endoscopes are not always fully sterilized when you go from one patient to another. So you can have cross-contamination. Patient can go in for one issue and come out with a different disease or a different problem. So the FDA has been interested in this for many, many years. The medical device community in general has been interested in this for many, many years. And now we're getting to price points because of the advent of digital imaging and CMOS sensors on the distal end, where we can start to make single-use endoscopes. And we have 2 programs right now that are getting ready to go into production with single-use endoscopes. There are other benefits as well beyond the cross-contamination issue that have to do with the way the hospital stocks the inventory, the fact that the surgeon always gets a brand new endoscope every time they're working, so they get a really good image. But the main driver for that part of the market really is the issue with cross-contamination. Okay, so I said just a minute ago that as we started down this road with this new business plan, we were very disciplined, and we used all of our sales and marketing resources in medical device because that was the best target, we believed, for the products we were working on. Our company has been in business for 40 years, and we worked in lots of different areas over those 40 years, including defense aerospace. And an interesting thing happened. We would go to these optics shows, and we would prepare to go to the optics shows by, sending out email blasts to everyone in the medical device industry, and they would all come to our booth. But some of the folks who knew us from many years ago when we worked in defense aerospace also came to our booth and saw what we were doing. And so there are a number of applications in defense aerospace that essentially came to us. And so now that we're a little bit bigger and we have some more resources, we're starting to target the defense aerospace market as a secondary market where we can use some of the same technologies that we've already developed the IP for the medical device space. Today we have one of the largest defense contractors in the country who is one of our main customers, and we have one of the largest satellite aerospace companies in the country that's also one of our customers. So we know that there's a market here. We've just started recently looking at the market in more detail and starting to tease out the different subsegments of the market that we think that we'll be ideally suited for. The main acronym that's used by the Defense Department that really speaks to where our technology can be useful is SWaP, which stands for size, weight, and power. And the idea here is that the Defense Department wants to reduce the size, the weight, and the power requirements for the systems that they have. And so the size and weight piece of that fits squarely with the micro-optics technology that we have, which can reduce the size of the optics and the optical systems that can be used on these platforms. We've started to look enough to know that there are 3 sort of subsegments that make a lot of sense for us. We're still exploring exactly how we're going to get into these and how far we can go. But the first 2 of these, satellite communications and UAV or drones, fit squarely with the micro-optics, right? It's obvious that in either of these cases, you have to lift the platform that you're working with off the ground. And if you can make that platform smaller, it takes less fuel. It gives you more space in the limited payload area for other parts of the system. So it's clear that the micro-optics fits in those 2 categories very well. It turns out that there are also some places in laser energy weapons where very small optics can play a critical role, and so we're looking at that as well. So this is an area that we expect to see some growth in over the next few years as we understand the market better than we have in the past. I want to talk just for a minute about digital imaging systems. Again, really what we have here is what I would call a horizontal integration of all of the requirements that you need to design an entire digital imaging system. So many years ago, we didn't have all these pieces. We've been very diligent in pulling together engineers with different disciplines. We did a strategic acquisition to pull in a group of engineers. And the idea here is that we have the optical engineers, we have the mechanical engineers, we have the electrical engineers, we have the systems engineers to build the entire system. So we can start from the illumination that brings the light into the body. We can do the optics that create the image out of the light. We can incorporate the CMOS sensor. We can put the wires on, and then we can design and put together the circuit boards that will analyze the image and do everything so that you can get the image up onto the screen. So this has a huge benefit to our customer because they can come to us as a one-stop shop to tell us what they need for their imaging system and know that we'll be able to supply the entire thing. Similarly, when it comes to taking the project from the early design phase all the way through to the mass manufacture phase, we can do everything that's required for our customer in that way as well. So this I would call the vertical integration that we have. So I already talked about the fact that we can start on the design phase. Our ideal customer comes in with not even a design, but a concept. And we work with them to determine what the specifications have to be, what the design is. We have our own machine shop. We have our own optics shop, so we can turn prototypes very quickly. Time to market is critical to our customers. and to us, for that matter. We have our own regulatory team, so we can help with their FDA requirements so that they can get FDA clearance. Of course, we have our volume production team that can roll this product into production. We have our own clean rooms and our own manufacturing facilities. So again, it's a one-stop shop for our customers, which they find very valuable. I talked a couple times about our engineering pipeline. So this is just a representation of our engineering pipeline today. These 4 or 5 programs that you see up here with the long bars, those are the projects that are now in production. And all of these other ones are programs that are various stages in the development pipeline. If you had looked at this slide some 5 or 6 years ago, you would have seen 3 or 4 lines on here because, as I said, we had to get started and we had to sort of prime the pump, right? The good news now is that every time we've had a program go into production, we've had at least one customer who's been waiting to come into the engineering pipeline on the other side. So we've done a good job of getting the word out into the community. Our sales and marketing team has done a good job. We've grown the engineering team so that we can continue to build the product pipeline, the engineering pipeline, because this really is the best indicator we have for future growth when we get into production. I want to just mention quickly, we did make a couple of acquisitions over the last 5 or 6 years. We did one about 2.5 years ago and the other about 5 years ago. We are not a roll-up strategy. So our idea here is not to roll up a whole bunch of optics companies. Our idea is that if there are optics companies out there that would fit with the technology that we're working on, that satisfy good financial requirements, and that fit from a cultural standpoint, we won't hesitate to bolt on some extra pieces that will help to expand the company faster, okay? And so we've been very successful with these two. The optics industry is highly fragmented, so we know that there are some other opportunities out there, so we'll continue to look at those. But there's no absolute requirement that we do acquisitions. We just think that it'll help to accelerate things and get things moving as fast as possible. Okay, the go-forward strategy will be straightforward. I've already talked about most of these. Advanced pipeline projects to commercialization. This is throwing the projects out into production. Expand the pipeline with new development programs. I just showed you the slide that indicates we're doing that. Drive the growth and efficiency in existing commercialized products. As we have more and more programs going into production, we continue to look at ways to do that more efficiently. We hired a COO, Chief Operating Officer, for the first time about a year ago, and that's all really to support the increased number of programs that are in our production facilities now. We want to maintain our competitive advantage by continuing to invest in technology development. We'll continue to have a disciplined investment strategy. We've been very careful to use our limited dollars, but we have been investing in sales and marketing and in engineering, in particular to grow that engineering pipeline. And then, as I said before, we'll look for strategic acquisitions that make sense to continue to grow as fast as we can. Let's see, we only have a couple minutes. I'll go through the financials relatively quickly. So the chart on the left here is the overall revenue, which has had an upward growth curve for the last 6 or 7 years. There have been some quarters that have gone up and down, and you can see the first half of our fiscal year here, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. We had a couple of down quarters. We've talked about publicly why this was. We had a couple programs that came in and out. We had one customer who filled their inventory and won't be back to us for a year or two. So there are a couple of reasons why it came down. We've also talked publicly about the expectation that the second half of the fiscal year, which we're in now, we expect to recover and to go beyond the revenue levels, the quarterly run rate that we've had previously. Our gross margins, you can see here, they're up and down a little bit year after year. Again, year to date, they're down a little bit, but this is really because of underutilization of the manufacturing side of things, and that will recover in the second half of the year as the revenues go up. Our targets are really to get to about 40%. We had 1 or 2 quarters last year that were very close to the 40%, and as we continue to grow and have better utilization, we're quite sure that we'll get to that level. Adjusted EBITDA, which is EBITDA minus stock-based compensation. You see for the first time we were adjusted EBITDA positive in a significant way just last year. And again, for the first half of this year, we've been down, but we expect that to recover in the second half of the year as well. This is all the gory details for the last few years, which I'm not going to go through. I'll finish on the balance sheet and just point out that in the last public filings that we did, which were for the December quarter, we had about $1 million in the balance sheet, and we had an untapped $1.25 million line of credit. So we believe we have plenty of liquidity to keep us moving forward with the program that we're working on. So with that, I will stop and take any questions. Yeah.
I had two questions on the pipeline side.
Yes.
So you have I didn't count them all, we have a number of projects, let's say a dozen or so.
Yeah.
There's no dates on that. How long does it take to get to that concept?
Yeah.
And then secondarily, get all the way over to these arrows. What is the relative addressable market size? Or how much revenue does that have?
Yep. So the question of how long it takes to go through that process varies depending on what the product is. Generally speaking, for a medical device product, if a customer comes to us and it's a fairly complex product and they're coming to us at the very beginning, it can take anywhere to 3 or 4 years. If a customer comes to us and it's a simpler product, particularly some of these defense products, those we can get into production in as short as 1 year. So it's basically 1 to 3 or 4 years that it takes to go through that entire process. When it gets to production, we had said previously, 2 or 3 years ago, that generally speaking, we would go into production with about $1 million in revenue when we start the first year into production, and hopefully, if our customer is successful, it goes up from there. Today, we're finding that in part because we're doing more of the system, and in part because of the customers that we've been targeting as we've been growing, we find that the going into production revenue levels are closer to $2 to $3 million per customer. Yeah, so they're starting to grow. Other questions? Okay, great. Thank you all very much.